Hello, and welcome to the DNA Behavior API Overview training. We're going to start with what is an API? An API, which stands for Application Programming Interface, is a software intermediary that allows two applications to talk to each other or an application to get information. We might think of an API as a waiter. So when you enter a restaurant, you have a menu of things that you can request from the waiter. You give your request to the waiter. He indicates that request to the kitchen. The kitchen does something with that request, and then the waiter brings back something to your table. Now, the actual back and forth with the waiter isn't making the food, but the waiter is taking your request to the kitchen is interpreting your request, and then sending you something back. So in this scenario, you can think about an API a little bit like a waiter, where a request goes out and then comes back. The request itself is just a string of data. I would like this, and then this is what comes back. An application or an app is a computer program designed to carry out some sort of task that's not related to the computer itself. So something like a word processor or a media player or accounting tasks or a weather app. So the application is actually usually set up to be a user interface, so something that you're interacting with. So how do these two things differ? The programming interface is really a series of requests and responses. It's raw data or strings of numbers and text that are going back and forth. The API requires some sort of interpretation for humans to really be able to use it well. It's like the waiter carrying a request to the kitchen. You may order the Cobb salad, but what the waiter writes down on his pad may be a number or maybe some sort of shorthand. The kitchen takes that shorthand and recognizes that what you want is the Cobb salad. And so it takes its knowledge, its information, its instructions and recipes, creates that Cobb salad. And the Cobb salad that comes back to your table is a bit like the application. It is prepared for the user interface. So it's taken the information that you requested from the waiter's request and brought it back in the form of something that's usable to you. So in this way, the waiter is like the API, but the salad that the waiter carries back is a little like the application. It is user interface. So the menu is a user interface. So it's written things in a way that you can understand and request from the waiter. So it's not just a list of ingredients and instructions. It's a list of finished dishes with a short description that you can understand. So that's like an application. The menu is an application. The waiter takes information from you to the kitchen and then brings back from the kitchen their application, which is the finished salad. So it's taking the instruction that you gave, adding something to it, adding more of an interface to it, making it interpretable by you so that you can eat your salad. So the program is designed usually by people to function with a display that's friendly and accessible for you to use, that provides context for what you're seeing on the screen. The API will have its own internal context, but if you just saw data from an API, you probably wouldn't really understand it, or it would be very difficult for you to interpret on its own. So APIs work by connecting between programs at a code level. And standards were created between programmers to agree how these requests and responses were going to happen. They call these requests and responses gets and posts. So a post sends information, a get requests information. DNA uses the REST principles, representational state transfer principles in its API to take advantage of an existing hypertext transport protocol, HTTP. Now, you might recognize that acronym from the start of many website addresses. This is a standard language that's been agreed upon by programmers and web developers everywhere, with its own set of language about what the requests and response means. This also means that you're not required to download a library to use the DNA API. In the past, each application had its own set of instructions and its own interpretation of what those instructions meant. And that required developers to download libraries and access libraries to understand what those request and response means. Because DNA is taking advantage of the HTTP protocol with a REST API structure, we don't need you to download a library. You are ready to go and start making calls right away. Your developers will understand this. But this is a shorthand that allows you to request information from an application and return information to your application. So you're requesting information from our database and we are sending it back to you, and then you are transforming that data into your application to make it usable by your users. And we'll see that a little bit more in the next few slides.
Now we want to get started with the DNA API. The most common way that this happens is through the incubator program. To be involved in the incubator program, you are required to have actively engaged in development of a software-based product that will form the core of your intended business purpose around behavior. You will be a privately held company in business for less than 3 years and at less than $1 million in annual revenue. If you don't meet these qualifications and you're still excited about using the DNA API, you can contact us at inquiries@dnabehavior.com, and one of our sales agents would be happy to speak with you about getting into one of our more advanced programs. To get started with the DNA incubator, we have a one-time setup cost that's greatly reduced for incubators, and then a monthly subscription that you would pay to be able to access our insights. You also have the option to purchase premium support, which allows you to get phone or web conference support from our team. So here's what happens. Here's how you get into the program. You would send a message to Inquiries with your application and qualification details. Our sales reps should be able to get you that information. If you don't have it, if you send a note to Inquiries, they'll be able to provide you with the application and qualification details. Next, you'll meet with one of our sales team for a 45-minute meeting, and they will qualify you and help you understand the program and understand your goals for using the API. When you get approved, the sales team will send you a special link to sign up for the API. This sign-up process will provide you a link to the sandbox environment. And then when you're ready to move to production, you'll schedule another review meeting with our team. So we'll review your application and make sure that it meets our requirements to go to production. And then once it gets approved, you'll get the link to go to our live production environment and get your application out in the world using our insights and yours to serve your clients. I've mentioned Sandbox a few times. The Sandbox is an environment used to experiment and test applications before they get used by end consumers. So this is where developers can test changes and new features without having live customers trying to pull that data at the same time. The production environment is an environment that's running the live application. It's actually being used by clients and customers, and this is where they interact with your application. So to access to these environments is determined on where you are and also which base URL you're using. So if you're using api.sandbox.dnabehavior.org, that's that sandbox environment. Then there's also another link that would give you the production environment. Now, in the development world, we tend to use lots of language interchangeably. So we have lots of names for similar things or for the same thing. So at DNA, we use sandbox site and production site for our API access. But the sandbox could also be known in your world as a beta test site or a QA or quality assurance site, or the non-prod site, meaning not production, or an incubator site, or potentially the MVP, your minimum viable product test site, or your staging site, or your lower environment. We call it a lower environment because typically code is moved up to production. The production and sandbox environments are completely separate from one another. So data in one environment may or may not exist in the other environment. They're not hooked to each other and they don't do any sort of synchronization. So you have test data in your sandbox environment and live data in your production environment. That production environment could also be known as your live site or production or prod or whatever the app name is, or your main site, or your admin system, or your main system. So again, depending on which URL you're using to access, you may have several different names for the same site, but at DNA, we have two environments, the sandbox environment and the production environment, regardless of what you call it. And that's kind of the name that we're using for it. So when you're interacting with us, if you use sandbox and production, that'll be a quick win for us that we'll know quickly where you are. If you use one of these other names, this is basically how we think that maps out. In the next section, we're going to talk a little bit more about exactly what it means to start working with the DNA API. Working with the DNA API. To get data to and from API, you're going to create client records. Then you're going to ask your client to take a questionnaire. Right now, you are building a custom app that has each of the questions and that forces your client to choose those questions, choose between those questions of most like me and least like me. And then you're going to send those answers to us as a post. In the future, we're looking to build a widget app that would allow you to use a client-ready discovery that you could embed into your application. So again, you're going to have the client take the discovery. So this is what that looks like. When you have the client take the discovery, you're going to get your token, and then you're going to post these answers to us. So we're assuming that in your app, you've already built the interface, the user experience that allows someone to choose most like me and least like me. You can see an example of how we do that at DNA Behavior through a trial. But then what you're going to do is send us something that looks like this, where you're sending us an indicator of who this person is and their first name and last name and their username. And then you're sending us for question 1, what did they score least like them and what did they score most like them? For question 2, what was least and what was most? Now in this example, they always chose the first one is least like me and the second one is most like me. In your real data, you'll probably see something like least 2, most 3, least 3, most 1, least 2, most 3. So there will be a variety of combinations, but you will send us the response for 46 questions. And it will look like this. Again, this isn't meant for people to consume. This is how this interface is working between your application that is sending us this data and our application, which is using these numbers, these answers to provide you now with some insights that your clients can use. So as an example, in the DNA reports for building the financial behavior report, assuming that we've already gotten the token and we've already submitted our assessment results, now I can do these GET calls. So once I have a client record and I know who that client is, I can start getting insights from DNA behavior. In this example, for this one-page report, we're pulling 4 different GET calls. The get unique style and description, which we've listed here as an engager and a description of what an engager is, the get behavioral biases, where we show you your top 2 behavioral biases, the get performance guide. Now in the get performance guide call, I'm going to get strengths and struggles and environment keys. We chose only to show environment keys here and not even all of them. We've prioritized which environment keys to show here on this report. And then with the get 5 scores, we're showing those 5 financial DNA scores and a description of them. Now you'll notice that I don't have an arrow pointing to this picture or the text over here or this graphic over here. And in fact, some of the descriptor text here, I didn't get from the API. All of those other areas are either standard text or graphs that are stored in our application. So that's part of our specific IP. It's really important to remember that you're not trying to rebuild our reports. You are building something unique on your own. And so this is really just to show you an example of how we're using the API to populate this particular one-page report. Let's look at that a little closer. So what you see on the report is laid out pretty nicely for a user to be able to read with some descriptions and some words around it, some additional text, another graphic, another picture, some graphics around these numbers. But what we're actually getting back is this string. So where I have those 5 scores, all I'm getting back is a value and a description, a value and a description, a value and a description. What we did is we chose to put those values into this graphic, put the number right in the middle of the graphic and create a graphic around it. That's not included in the API. You're not getting the user experience. You're just getting the data that we use to create that user experience. So again, you see here, you're going to get strengths back, and then you'll get struggles, and then you'll get environment keys. In the Get Performance Guide, we didn't use the strengths and struggles when we pulled back. We pulled some of those environment keys to watch out for. Again, you don't have to use all of the information that comes back in a call, and you don't have to use the calls that we're using. You certainly want to build something that is unique to you. So for example, you might build something that's really unique that looks like this, where you have a menu, you have some announcements about your upcoming appointments or an event that's happening in your world. You might have a performance overview and maybe a budgeting area and an asset allocation area with your logo. And so in that case, this would all be sourced from your data, from your application, from other places that you're calling data. So that could be other APIs, or it could be direct calls to your database from your application. And then you're also peppering in some additional information that is sourced by DNA. So here, a strategist and pioneering and skeptical, you could get from those Get assessment results. Here you could get behavioral biases to watch for from the Get behavioral biases. This could be an example of the description that you're getting around strategists. And then this is a different way to show those 5 dial scores that we showed earlier. You might show them like this. Instead of a round graph, you might show them more like this, like building up tubes. So that's what we want to see, is something unique about how you're using the insights from DNA uniquely and blending them with what's in your own application. The idea is not to replicate what we have, but to build on what we are able to provide you and give you something unique. For example, we had a client ARQ that got a risk score and risk group, and then this is how they present it. So this doesn't look like any of the DNA reports. It's really unique to ARQ, where they're showing what your grouping should be, and then a next where they start walking you through what that means to them and what you need to do next in their environment. Next, we're going to talk about where to find documentation for the API. Documentation for the DNA API. So when you're accepted into the DNA API program, you will get access to our IP pack of client accessible information. This is a document set that's going to allow you to have lookup tables and reference material. So in that set, you will have the natural behavior questions. So you'll use those questions to build the user interface to allow clients to take the discovery. This one's super important. You'll also have a description of 16 factors, which will give both business DNA or financial DNA descriptions, depending on the API pack that you've purchased. You'll have lookup of confidential easing mind. So here you're going to have ways to manage behaviors to calm clients and their preferred contact methods. Now, this isn't available in the API, but knowing the client style, you'll be able to do this lookup in this documentation if you wanted to add those additional insights. In addition, there's an optimized marketing plan. So again, you can include this in your application or not. It might be something interesting for your advisors or your internal team to know about a user. The confidential T-score to population percentage lookup. So a T-score is going to be the main score that comes back for you based on the answers that are submitted, and will be a score between 20 and 80, which gives you the relative strength of the score for that client. If you want to know what that translates to as a percentage of population, then you're going to look at this percentage population lookup table. The master reference tables are going to help you look up what those code numbers mean. That will give you insights, reports, performance guides, response codes. So it's going to help you understand what those unique style numbers are, what those insights numbers are. And then the matrix to drive compatibility. So you may have seen on a DNA report where we say minimal modification required. This is the matrix that will help you derive that if you wanted to build a matrix similar to that. There's also a risk behavior to risk grouping. So we saw that used in an example just a minute ago. And then the unique style description in a shorter form. So you'll have access to all of these things, and we'll continue to add and remove resources here as necessary. So you can also find information on the APIs themselves on our website, api.dnabehavior.biz. That's going to provide an overview of the API itself. And then if you click on that site and click help, or click for more details, you'll go to api.dnabehavior.biz/help, which is going to provide a list of each of the calls and its description. If you click on the link, you're going to see more details. So I showed you snippets of those calls from the report that I showed before. You can look here and it will give you a description of what that call is, as well as some examples of what's in the response. So you get a really good idea of what's available. If you can't access a call, you can contact inquiries@dnabehavior.com to see if you just need to upgrade your package. So if you see something on that site that you don't have access to, it could be that that's just not been included in your pack. So if you need those insights or would like to have those insights, you can speak to our team about how to get those included. And then I really want to urge you to remember that just going to market with our questionnaire and results that look like our reports with maybe some very minor changes or color changes is strictly forbidden. We're looking for you to add value to your clients, to do something that is unique. And so if you're not building something that is uniquely different from the reports that we've built, then you need to continue to work on that product and look at what you can do to make your offering truly unique from the DNA offering. If you're not prepared to do that, but you really want to be able to resell what the DNA behavior team has done, contact our sales team about a business development agreement instead of an API agreement. So again, we really want what you build to be unique to your clients. If you have more questions for us, you can contact us at dnabehavior.com, inquiries@dnabehavior.com, at www.dnabehavior.com, or you can call our 800 number, 866-791-8992. Thank you.